Well, here we are. I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next. It's the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I'm talking with Kyle Alexander of doom pop group Death Doula, who are just about to release their debut album, Love Spells, on October the 11th on Death Doula Records. So the origins of Death Doula, I guess we can say, go back before it was even a band. It goes back to Kyle's partner, Kerry Jones. And I won't give away the story because Kyle tells it in the interview, but basically she came up with the concept of Death Doula. And out of that, she started collaborating with Kyle. And then they brought in Keith Vidal on bass and Adam Kozie on drums. And that is the lineup of Death Doula as it is now. And I started by saying that the band is doom pop. That's one of the descriptions that they have coined to come up with their sound. They also describe themselves as art rock, very kind of dreamy, hazy, texturally rich rock music. And I don't want to say, when I say texturally rich, it's not kind of overloaded with layers. There's a subtlety to the music. And they have some great hooks too. They have some great songwriting. Kerry has a really great voice. And yeah, so we talk about the album, we talk about the origins of the band, we get into some other interesting discussions, Kyle and I. And in general, I'm trying to cut down these introductions, but particularly today, I'm feeling quite worn out because I ran a marathon yesterday and now my body hates me. So anyway, I'm going to leave it to Kyle to talk about all things Death Doula related. And yeah, you can find the band at deathdoulaband.com online, and you can get links to anything else that you would want relating to the band there. You can find me on all social media at Tom Osman Sounds. And if you would like to check out what I'm doing musically and the album that I have in the pipeline, you can go to tomosmansounds.com. And with that, I hope I haven't forgotten anything, but if I have, I'll put it in the description. I'm going to play a song from the forthcoming album at the end with a little clip for you to get a taste of Death Doula right now before my conversation with Kyle. And so with that, I say Kyle Alexander from Death Doula, take it away.
Rhetorical. Most times it's hard to tell which one of us is the oracle. There is a fear of fear.
Kyle, Tom, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So what does the day have in store for you?
I have another interview later today, and I think I'm gonna watch some kind of art house movie. That's about it.
Cool. That sounds like a reasonable plan. Not bad. Have you decided what the movie is going to be?
Yeah, a friend of mine recommended this Fassbender movie, not Fassbender the actor, but Fassbender, what's his name? Reiner Werner Fassbender, movie called Ali Fear Eats the Soul. I've never heard of it before.
It does sound pretty art house.
It's pretty, it's supposed to be really good. There's in here in Portland, there's a movie rental store that's like one of the last movie rental stores in America, and they have like every cool film that you could ever want to see, and you can rent it in Blu-ray for like $3. It's amazing. So
Oh, that's
I go there
nice.
I go there all the time.
Yeah, I do appreciate that, the opportunity to have physical things, because I think it kind of adds a little bit of value. You know, if you have too many things at your fingertips, then it's kind of
Mhm.
easier just to switch between them.
Yeah. Actually, on that same note, I recently so as I just was playing like a Death Doula song on Spotify, and I was like, man, this mix sounds so bad. Like I didn't green light this, and then I pulled up the wave file, and it sounded perfect. And I was like, oh, the extra mastering and MP3 compression that they add is like taking something away, that I would notice. And so I said, I'm over this. And I deleted my Spotify account and I bought an iPod. And I've been only listening to music off of my iPod for the last couple of months. And I feel that having that managed, because there's only so much space on my hard drive, I can't have every possible thing that I want. There isn't unlimited access. I have to it's changed my relationship with music a lot. And I have to be much more cognizant of like, it takes time to put music on there now. And so if I'm going to be listening to something, it's going to be like a whole week's worth of music. And then I really spend a lot of time with it.
Mm.
And sometimes I've been places and I've shown people my iPod and they'll be like, there's so little music on here, but it'll be like, you couldn't listen to all of the music on there in like 2 days if you just sat there the whole time. But
Mm.
people, you know what I mean? And that's been like a big thing for me. I just feel like I didn't want to contribute anymore to this system. I think a lot of musicians are not happy about it. We're not personally the happiest about where streaming has taken the world, but that's my one little, it's my one little act of resistance.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm sort of in a way doing a similar thing right now. I became horrified when I realized how much time I'm spending on my phone recently and how much
Hmm.
time with social media because I completely I quit all social media a few years ago. And then when I started kind of making things creatively, whether my own music or doing podcasts and things like this, I thought, right, okay, it's kind of legitimate. I have stuff to promote. But you
Hmm.
know how insidious this stuff can be. Once you have it, you just find yourself just
Right.
scrolling on stuff and you're like, what am I doing? What am
Totally.
I doing? I've been
Totally.
hypnotized again.
Yeah. I actually recently made the transition to having a dumb phone that just calls and
Mm.
texts. Um, which my one complaint is that it's like T9, so I have to like take forever to text, and
Yeah.
people will just send me text, and I'm just like, but I don't have any social media either. I besides the band's social media, which my partner Kerry runs. It's like that whole thing. I feel better. I feel like and when I quit, I would like leave the space where the app was empty, and I just like open it and like try to press it like 8 times, like a hamster trying to get the drugged water or whatever, like just going boop, 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 boop. Where's the instant dopamine hit? Like what? And then I'd like hit it like 10 times and be like, oh, right,
Yeah.
or something like that. And it was like, it made me feel really weird to observe myself behaving in such a like sub the subconscious is in control, or like I'm not really cognizant of my actions type of
Yeah.
way. That's really awesome. I'm really happy for you. How do you feel since you got off of it?
Well, it's like I completely got off it before and then I went back
Hmm.
on it. And so
Mm.
now I'm kind of figuring out how to disengage from it. And it's also partly to do with my phone. So when I was last year, I was living in Berlin.
Hmm.
And while I was there, I got quite a decent. I won't go into the whole story, but I had a record player sitting around for ages in storage. And I thought it didn't work, but it turned out that I just put the fuse in the wrong way.
Oh, okay.
So when I was in Berlin, I set it up, and suddenly I realized, oh, I can listen to records. This is amazing, And
Hmm.
people have got different opinions about, whether it really makes much of a difference listening to records. But one of the things I found that it was on this point of having a limited amount of things. It's like I would go, right, these are my records.
Hmm.
What am I going to listen to? I'm going to put this thing on. So that kind of changed the way that I was engaging with music a lot of the time, even though, like
Hmm.
I'll be interviewing bands and reviewing stuff. And so like I will listen to things streaming and I listen to stuff on Spotify, but it's nice to just kind of like focus my
Hmm.
attention.
Hmm.
But I came back to the UK at the end of last year and I was horrified to realize the other day that it had been like 9 months and I hadn't got my record player set up. So 2 days ago, I got like an adapter that I needed and I set it up. So now the things are all kind of like happening at the same time. So I'm
Hmm.
going, okay, now I want to listen to music. I'm going to put a record on. I'm going to read a book. I'm not going to look at Instagram. I've started taking things off my phone.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
haven't taken Instagram off it yet. And the excuse I've made for myself is that when I'm like hosting podcast episodes, for example, it's very convenient if I can link to like YouTube things. I'm like,
Hmm.
maybe
Totally.
I can do this on my computer. If I can do it
Hmm.
on my computer, I have no excuse. But for the time being, I'm making excuses for myself. It's like
Hmm.
the little gremlin in my brain is going, no, 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 no. You need this. You can't get rid of this.
Yeah, did you ever like quit smoking or something like that? You know,
Yeah.
like yeah, it reminds me of quitting smoking. Like when I quit, there's like the first few days of like you're like lifting the mountain, you're like, yeah, I can do that. I'm so bad at, you know, and then like 5, 6 days in, there's this little voice that's like, you know, like just and you're like, okay, like the
Yeah.
little inner child, you know, and the next thing you know, it reminds me a lot. It's very like feels as addictive as smoking cigarettes did. And
Mm.
I feel like, yeah, I'm making the shift away from it these last few years was kind of just like sort of a necessity, but also it feels like a luxury. It feels like when having, there's this writer in America, I'm not sure if you know about her name, Fran Lebowitz. She's really funny from New
Think so.
York. And uh, she's like, kind of like dry humor, social observations, but she never owned a computer, a typewriter, a TV. She's like her whole life she's only had books, the radio, and her phone, her like landline. And you know, I'm sure for a lot of people in the past when that was happening, they're like, "You're crazy, Fran. Like you're funny." But now there's so many people like, "I want to just have a landline," and so
Mm.
I feel like I got tired of wanting to do it and just decided to do it. And it, you know, but I'm, you know, with you on my laptop and I'm not like a complete Luddite. I
Yeah.
just, I feel like I'm interested in a more intentional way relating to technology.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's funny, yeah, on the topic of using technology, sometimes I'll be asking musicians or whoever else in the music world questions about technology, and I have to remind myself, like, yeah, I can talk about how great analog things are and be like face
Hmm.
to face, but I am interviewing people via Zoom. So I am
Hmm.
making use of technology when I do this,
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just the algorithmic feeds that really are the bad actor here. I remember, I was, you know, really online when I was super young. And I remember when the internet was a lot more sort of like Wild West and free form. And it definitely had a different emotional feeling to be there. So I guess Zoom's okay because, you know, we're doing something that's human.
Mm.
And, you know, I'm not talking to like an AI that's then translating what I want to say to you or what it thinks I want to say to you. Because then that would be kind of like scary concept. But as far as like technology goes, you know, we're not like analog purists or anything.
Yeah.
When we recorded in the studio, we did it to Pro Tools and we did we did 2 sessions in the year. So the first session was 2 days and we did 4 songs, and the second session was 3 days and we did 6 songs. And just like we worked so fast, there was no way that we would have been able to get it all done if we had been working on an analog system,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
those first four songs that you did, were those the ones that you've already released onto Bandcamp?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They were like our singles. We wanted to do the singles first to kind of have something out there, and then we were going to fill out the rest of the record. And that's coming out. Oh my gosh, how day is
11th
it?
of October?
Yes, 11th of October.
Or
Uh,
maybe I should say October 11th because you're American.
I think people say either one,
Oh, do
but
they? Okay.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
it's just like the way that you write it.
We do the thing. I think about that a lot, that it actually makes sense to have day, month, year, just because it's like smallest, biggest, largest.
There is that logic.
But I think Americans just like to have the word and then numbers separated.
Yeah. I mean, there's some logic both ways. Now, I could ask you a very obvious question. I could ask you about the origin of the band, and I could ask
Hmm.
you where the name of the band comes from. And ultimately, I probably will do that. But I thought it might be a little bit more interesting and entertaining if I try and, from a little bit of research that I've done, make
Hmm.
some guesses, some informed guesses, and you can tell me how
That's great.
successfully I'm
I love
guessing.
it. Yeah.
So I think that it was your partner and singer guitarist Kerry Jones who originally came up with the name Death
Hmm.
Doula. And I
Hmm.
believe that maybe she was already using that name before the two of you started collaborating together. Is that correct?
Correct. Very good.
And so I don't know if I'm going to be able to pick around about when she started working with the concept of Death Doula, but I want to say it would have been about 8 or 9 years ago.
I could tell you, I mean, I almost wish she was here, but I can tell you a sort of short form of it, which
Mhm.
is that she was living in Brooklyn, New York, and she injured her wrist skating and
Ah, okay.
couldn't play guitar. And so she was suffering from a loss, and she had a visit with a death doula, a meeting with a death doula, who are, not necessarily just for death, they're also for anyone who's coping with any kind of a loss, a person
Ah.
who helps you work through that. And so the meeting with the death doula inspired her to get a DAW and just like create ambient music essentially with vocal layering. And so she was so inspired that she took on the name Death Doula. So when I met her, she had been using that as her moniker.
And so had she, when you did start collaborating it together,
Mhm.
did she have like fully formed songs that have now carried through to the album, or they've all been created together between the two of you and then the
Yeah,
rest of the band?
the latter. I during the pandemic, my life was just like going totally to shit. And a friend of mine who lived in a really rural area in the Oregon coast, um, had a room for me, and I just was like, okay, screw it. And so I just threw away everything else in my life and moved to this remote town of like 3,000, not 3, like 13,000 people for a few years. And one day at my favorite restaurant in town, I saw Carrie, my partner, and was like, "Who's this?" And went and flirted with her, and she was like, not into me at all. And she was like, "Get lost, buddy. Who the hell do you think you are?" And then, like a month later, I saw her again, and I was undeterred, and I was like, "I have a little studio set up in my house. Like, why don't we get together?" And she was an artist, and we've made the first she came over, and the first thing that we made was what became the demo for Disembark, the song
Hmm.
Disembark. And so like I had created a programmed beat that eventually was replaced with like a live beat, and then I just like came up with that like like right on the spot, and then she started singing and improvised the melody, and it became the melody of that is the final melody. Like there's never been like a revision of like any of the ingredients.
Mm.
And we were both like, whoa, like this doesn't just happen, and then it was also New Year's Eve. So I sort of was like trying to keep her as long as I could so that we would get to midnight. So if you have someone over on New Year's Eve when it hits midnight, you have to kiss. So we started kissing and just fell in love. It was like instantaneous, It was, and I've never really had anything like that. And it was like so obvious that we were meant to live together and collaborate together. And
And what year was that?
there, that was the like end of 2021, beginning of
Ah,
2022.
so this was in the middle of the pandemic black hole.
Yeah, kind of like in that space of like like I said, like during the pandemic, I wanted to move to the Oregon coast to kind of like chill out and get away from some of the craziness that was happening.
Mm.
And there
Like
were a lot of
specifically connected to the pandemic or other things like just in your
like
life generally?
a lot of things in my life, but then it was also made much worse by the pandemic. Just
Mm.
like I was like I don't I'm almost a little scared to say this, but I was like drinking really bad, and like a band that I was playing in broke up, and um college went online, and I was finishing college, and I just was like there's like no reason for me to like go be anywhere that isn't just super relaxed,
Yeah.
and so yeah, like that was when I quit smoking, I quit drinking, and like worked on myself a lot. And And it kind of had reached this point right around that time when I met Kerry, where it was sort of like, okay, like where do we go from here in this pandemic? Like, what's next? Like, what's gonna happen? You know, what's my life gonna be like? And
And
um,
at what point did the two of you realize that you were both musicians?
oh, I mean, the first meeting when I said she like told me to step off, we like had talked a little bit about music, and
Okay.
yeah, she described herself as an outsider artist, and I was like, whoa, that's cool. You know, I like a lot of outsider music, but I sometimes people will describe their genre and they'll make themselves sound much cooler than they are.
Mm.
And they'll say like a thing like outsider artist, but it'll just be like really bland indie rock or something like that, you know? I'm sure you know what I mean. Or somebody be like, I'm an experimental art noise punk, and then it's just like it just sounds like Dinosaur Jr. And you're like, it's like, you know, you know
It
what I
wasn't that
mean?
complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. So when she came and played with me the first time, it was like the first time when I first heard her sing, I was like, oh, she's really good. You know,
So
I didn't know what I
you
was
hadn't
gonna get.
actually you hadn't heard her sing before she came round.
Mm-mm, no.
Oh, that's
I actually
cool.
didn't listen to the music she had made with other people for like God, like maybe a year after we like lived together.
Mm.
And I just didn't want to know. I wanted to only be into what we were creating together. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's no in this run of songs, there's no songs that uh existed before I joined the band. It's all stuff that
Yeah.
she and I have created together. And I had another after we met, I like went to visit her in Portland. Portland is about it's a major city about 4 hours from where I was living at the time. And so
Mm.
I like went and stayed with her for a few days. And have you ever seen the movie Inside Llewyn Davis?
Yes, I have. It's the Coen Brothers movie, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's a scene where Llewyn like meets the guy who's like gonna either decide if his career takes off or doesn't, and he plays a song and it's like super beautiful, super meaningful. And in that moment, we the audience feel like, oh, he's really got it. He really deserves it. And then the person he's uh, singing to, played by F. Murray Abraham, is like, I don't see a lot of money here. But before he says that his face is so neutral, you don't know if he's gonna
Mm.
like it or doesn't like it, and it's devastating. But like I played the chords of a song I had been working on for like years, and I was totally blocked on. And Carrie's face was just like that. She's like, I love it, you know, and it became, and it was like the most like, terrifying 5 seconds of my life was
Yeah.
her like stunned non-reaction, and that became the witness, the chords that became this our song, the witness,
Hmm.
and so it's that those were really yeah. So we had disembark, we had the witness like pretty much like right away, you know, playing together, and it you know if you've played in bands like it doesn't always become clear what type of music you want to make with another person instantaneously. It's
Mm.
very so that kind of has informed a lot of how she and I make music together. Like in the past, I've been a lot more cerebral or like with intention or like had concepts that I wanted to like a mold to kind of put things into so that there was an automatic form that would come out of things.
Mm.
But in Death Doula, it's just like totally free form, very organic. Like I've returned away. I used to play like a lot of like more specific jazz chords, and I like wouldn't play fifths, and I would do things that were a lot more like art punk, you know, kind of like thinking a lot. But with Death
Mm.
Doula, it's like a very like heart centered like I'm just gonna like make something, and then I'm gonna see how people react to it. Like it's almost more like allowing allowing songs rather than writing
Hmm.
songs. And yeah.
Oh, I was just going to ask you. So you mentioned that you had a sort of a little home studio recording setup.
Mhm.
So how did you get started with that? Like I imagine that this was something that you were doing before you
Mhm.
moved to this rural town.
Yeah, I used to in my like early 20s, late teens, I was like a big ambient music head, and so I had always just kind of created like ambient music records. Those aren't available to listen to anymore. because I've wanted to move on past that. But I've had like a little DAW setup. It was just like, like a tiny interface with some like nice mics and a little bit of outboard and some monitors and a computer. I actually don't have most of that stuff now because I kind of sold it all as part of the move to Portland
Mm.
to afford to move. But we're interested in getting back into that. It kind of became an interesting thing. I know a lot about recording and a lot about engineering, but I thought that in Death Doula I could, instead of thinking that I know, like just go into the process of doing things as a band and like learn more. So
Hmm.
we have ambitions someday to do like more self-recorded stuff, but part of the decision to record in the studio came from, like it's like it's building a home studio that can do a band is probably like at a high level is like
Mm.
a probably like $25,000 endeavor
Hmm.
if you're like doing it seriously, or maybe like 10,000 if you're like trying to cut corners,
Yeah.
and so like going into a studio where there's like a good room, great microphones, a desk, an engineer who's like those things are really cool. So as much as I miss doing more computer production stuff, and we actually have done some the the beginning of Disembark starts with like a vocal pad that I created from Kerry's voice, that I then like put onto a 4-track tape and then like kind of like tweaked the speed control so I like to use the computer still to make ambient textural stuff a lot.
That makes a lot of sense because one of the things that I felt listening to the album that really comes through is that there's a really very warm, enveloping sound to the
Mhm.
whole album. And I was trying to figure out what it was that was producing this. And when you started talking about having a background making ambient music, I thought, oh, okay, this is interesting. Like you've got like
Mhm.
an interest in the sort of the tone and the textures and the
Mhm.
overall sound of the record. I noticed that you're credited as playing baritone guitar. So I was wondering how much that was connected to the
Mhm.
sound as well. I mean, what was the decision to start playing baritone guitar?
So baritone guitar came out of uh, when I was playing in those punk bands. I had an amp that was really old from like the 1960s or something or 70s, and it didn't have a lot of mid-range because it was designed as a bass amp.
Mm,
And so I just started tuning my guitar lower to try to get more and just have the guitar's like notes be more in the range that I wanted the sonic textures to be. And I also was like, what if you played jazz chords in the context of like punk rock in like a lower tuning? Like not like doing I feel like, a lot of lower tuning is done by like a lot of heavy musicians, and not that we're not heavy. I just kind of was like, what does it sound like to play clean,
yeah.
with some of these things? And I found that like baritone actually only gives you five more notes lower, only
Mm,
five. But because the each string has its individual timbre, when it's in a different tuning, you can play chords in lower registers that are notes on a normal guitar, but because they're organized differently, they sound both familiar and unique at the same time.
mm.
So a lot of probably almost all of the songs in Death Doula, I could probably figure out how to play them in like a standard tuning. Except for Loom and Dory Joint's Al are in another open G tuning. So like uh, playing around with tunings, just those two tunings has been like a also a fun thing because yeah, I sort of want to sound like unique but familiar at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's what came out of that. And there's been a big process of like like I've changed the pickups out in the guitars and try to just get it to sound good in the context of the band because I'm just there to serve the song. Kerry's vocal does so much, and Keith's bass playing does so much, and Adam's drum does so much. It's like they're so good, all three of them, that I have to like and I'm like a little younger than everybody else in the band, so I feel
Mm.
like I don't have as much experience, and I have to just like be super unique and be super good. Yeah, the warm texture. Keith, so there's like a little bit of ambient stuff throughout the record, and Keith did a lot of keyboard parts that are sort of buried under there that almost like we were really interested in like having layers that are not clear that they're layers. We wanted to have like
Yeah.
yeah, like
I think you did a good job with that because it's like, yeah, it's like, it's somehow rich, but it's not kind of like obvious with lots of layers to it. It doesn't feel busy.
yeah, like like if we were gonna do like a record where the intention was to be a maximalist record, we would probably have had the layers be like a lot more like stark or something like that. And Kerry plays guitar on the album too. She plays really beautiful guitar playing on y y I'm sorry, have you heard the things that are going to be released in October yet?
Yes. Yes. I've heard the whole
Okay.
album.
On a song Dirty Shirt that's not out yet, there's this like great dual guitar stuff that she added. And um man, this is when we were recording in the studio, we had her guitar go through like a really nice clean Fender amp, but then also split into the preamp of a crappy four track. So
Mhm.
the two things together were like really bad and then really good. And then together you get this like texture that's like warm, but also like why does that sound that way? And so that was another one of the intentions was like I played through two different amps, one that was like tiny and kind of sounds like a radio or something like that, and the other one is like
Yeah.
a really nice amp. And those two layers together create that you can kind of just like have the good sound and then add in a little bit of like not great, and it can get to this cool place. So maybe that's what you're hearing when you hear like a warmth.
Yeah, I like that. I like those little interesting subtleties. So you brought up the financial side of things, and it was actually something that I wanted to get into
Mhm.
with you because on this
Totally.
podcast, I'm really interested in sort of exploring some of the practicalities, like, the less
Hmm.
glamorous necessities for people that make
Totally.
music. And so, only be as precise and detailed as you feel comfortable
Hmm.
being, but I'm curious to know how much does it cost to make an album? Because you mentioned, if you want to have a home studio, you're looking at something between ten to $25,000.
Yes.
You went down the
Right.
route of having a professionally recorded album. You had
Hmm.
Adam Lee
Yeah.
recorded it and mixed by Bob Cheek.
Yeah. Bob
Um,
Cheek is yeah, we Adam Lee is a great recording engineer, but we wanted just sort of like a slightly different aesthetic in the mix. So we went to recorded there, and then this is like another reason why I was saying that using digital can actually be like using technology can be good because they have the best recording equipment there, great preamps, great converters. So everything that's coming back out of Pro Tools sounds as good as like a tape would, but it opens up different possibilities. So we like recorded and then sent those files to Bob Cheek, who is based in a different city. And then
mm,
Bob Cheek works really quickly and got them back to us. So I think it split between several people, each person contributing. I think it was like 4,000 something dollars for both sessions combined, for maybe a little bit like more like five. And the truth is like if I had had to do that, I would have spent so much money. And if you think about the concept of like your time having value and
yep.
everybody in the band total their time value surmised, like it's
Mm,
actually there's a lot of value in doing things super quickly. And
yep.
also the pressure is good too because we're still as a band like learning how we want to make records together, like to go into it with infinite time to work on stuff, to infinite time to tweak stuff, you can run into that risk of messing things up. But
And
yeah,
how?
like yeah,
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, how long? I don't remember if you said how long did each of the two sessions actually last for?
the first the first session was 2 days, and we did those four songs, and the second session was 3 days, and then I think Bob is crazy fast as a mixer, and he took about 5 days, I think, total. So, you know, but basically we wanted to work as quickly as we could because we were very like always sort of creating deadlines for ourselves and wanting to like
Yeah.
achieve this in this point, achieve this in this point. And you hear these stories about how an artist is like announces an album, they're like, it's going to be out this fall, and then it doesn't come out until like spring the next year. And now I understand why that is, because there's constantly little problems that come out, or like a person delivered a mix that's like 99% there, but everybody notices that 1% or something like that. We're all like, one of the things that I really love about rock music is that you have this like system of like a songwriter or songwriting team in our case, like come up with the shell of a song, and then you bring it to the band, and then it gets worked on and fleshed out there, and then you play it live, and how people react to it fleshes that out a little more, and then you record it,
Mm.
and then it gets worked on, and then it gets mixed, and then it gets mastered. And so by the time it's actually out in the world, there's all of these different processes that have like, it's like a community experience by that point. Whereas like if you do everything in your bedroom, there's so many people that have really benefited from that, and it's really helpful, but it can lose that sense of like there's like a system of checks and balances or community that goes to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also know from personal experience that if you're doing stuff yourself, or you don't have deadlines, and you don't have yeah, kind of other constraints, you can end up just going crazy and
Yeah.
mixing things forever, re-recording things
Yep.
forever.
Hmm.
There's never any end point to it. You're like, I could just fiddle around with this thing. Like, oh,
Totally.
I've just learned some other mixing thing I can do. Let's go back and do all the
Right.
tracks like that.
Right. Totally. There's so many new tools that come out, or like plugins that are amazing. I think in the future, one thing we found, just because it's like a learning experience, but I think we found that Kerry maybe would like to do the vocal performances with slightly less pressure,
Mm.
because it's like, as the guitar players were sort of like, oh, we can do it, but like singing is such a sacred, intimate thing that just physically like is challenging to do. But that's, there's what's great is, with technology, you could record in the studio, bring the files home, have like a nice little booth, and then do the vocals, and then send them to mixing. And I think that you maybe asked me a question, but I can't remember what it was.
It's all good. Um, Something else that I wanted to ask you about, another
Mhm.
sort of practical question, and this probably will be something that you've got plenty of experience of, not just with Death Doula, but with other bands you've had, is booking shows.
Mhm.
And it can apply to tours as well, but even just shows. Like, the experience that I personally have of playing live has always just been very local. So it's like in the
Mhm.
city that I'm in. Um, but when it comes to playing somewhere else, I've spoken to various people about kind of how they go about booking shows and the different sort of networking that you might be involved with, or like different
Mhm.
references or different tools. What has it been like for you in terms of how you know, find a venue and how you pick where you're going to play, and how you just kind of like organize all of that?
Well, one thing geographically you might not be familiar with is the American West Coast has a handful of really, really big cities that are extremely far from one another. Um, so you have Seattle is like 4 hours from Portland, north of Portland, and then the nearest major city south of Portland is like 10 hours away, 10 or 11 hours away. So we were actually going to play our first show in Seattle on October 11th, actually, the record release day. So that's just been a process of like re watching a lot of live videos, looking around through Bandcamp, of finding bands that we connect with, that we feel like we'd be a good fit with, and cold emailing them and being like, hey, would you like to play with us? And sometimes they don't respond, or sometimes they're like, yes, you are cool. Let's play together. And then you reach out to venues, and then The venues have like all kinds of systems of like who isn't allowed to play, like who has a draw, who doesn't have a draw.
Now,
If
when
you
you
don't have a
say
draw,
who is and who isn't allowed to play, what do you mean?
yeah, like some bands have maybe formerly played a venue and didn't pull enough of a crowd. And
Ah,
so
okay.
that band is not banned from playing, but they can't play Friday night when it's the peak hours or something like that. So
Interesting.
we've been navigating that. Portland doesn't really have that. Portland kind of doesn't, they don't really care. Like, five people show up to your show, they're going to be like, "Good job, bud," which is really freeing and really fun. We've played a couple of shows where there were less people in audience in attendance than we would have liked, but those five people were having their minds blown. So um,
Yeah, well, that's
that's
like
been a
it's the old black flag principle that even if you're playing to only five people, you've got to put on a show on for them because, those five people chose to come see you.
exactly. And and you feel the most gratitude for those five people. You don't feel, at least I don't feel like entitled to anything. Like anyone who enjoys it, anyone that we engage with, I feel so grateful for. Like where I grew up was like a smaller town that was about 2 hours away from the nearest major city.
Mm.
So in order to go see the bands that I liked, I would have to drive 2 hours, and then you have to get food basically, and then you go see the show, and there's so much anticipation that if it's good, it's like the best thing in your life. Like it's just like demigods. Um, but if it's bad, it's like the worst thing ever. Like I saw some shows when I was growing up where I was just like, man, they're phoning it in so hard and
Mm.
they're not think so. I always try to stay in that mind frame of like, what if some 16-year-old dweeb like thinks I'm like, and we are like the best band in the world. I want them to feel that they saw the best band in the world, and I want to give back what I got out of this thing,
Yeah, that's a
you
very,
know?
very good principle to have. I've realized that, interestingly enough, I've interviewed quite a number of musicians who are based in Portland.
Oh,
And
cool.
I wonder if I start naming names, if you will know them and or have met them and or have played with them. The first one I think you will know, 40 Feet Tall.
Yeah, they're great. We haven't played any shows with them, but we've definitely sent a lot of emails back and forth. The show that we're playing, the next show we're playing in Portland, is at a venue called the Lollipop Shop, which is a really cool spot. And one of the members of 40 Feet Tall does the sound there. So um, that's gonna be when we meet at our
Nice.
next show.
And I think actually possibly the first musician that I interviewed who's based in Portland is Neezy Dynamite from Fox Medicine. Do you know that band?
Mm-mm.
Maybe
But
maybe
maybe I
by
should
you by sort of the coincidence of the universe, you're gonna find yourself crossing paths with them after this conversation.
totally. I think that those I that's another thing, when you were asking me about how songs get written is like
Hmm.
I'm not really necessarily like a spiritual person, but I'm not a spiritual person. And I feel, especially since I'm like moving away from technology, I'm like allowing possibilities into my life. And so I'm paying attention to synchronicities. And
Yeah.
when I went to go see this rapper I really love called Billy Woods last night. And the opener had a song where he was rapping about death doulas. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, oh my God, like it just feels like I'm totally like I was meant to be in this moment. Like I
Yep.
can't like the whole scenario was is I'm I'm following the path that I'm supposed to be following, or at least a path.
Yeah.
And so if I do, I'm gonna email you if I run into that person, and I'm gonna say, hey, it happened, and then we'll follow up. But
That'd
I
be
think it
cool.
will. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a their own style, which I think is unique to them. They describe themselves as bubblegum doom.
That sounds great.
And once you hear them, it makes absolute perfect sense.
That's cool. We have had a hard time pinning down our genre, but right now we're calling ourselves Doom Pop
Doom pop, yes, I think I saw that. I like that. Doom pop is good. I
or
like that as a
Dust.
description.
We also call ourselves art rock. It's so hard. Like I was saying earlier, sometimes people inflate. what they call their genre, and it can be a little bit like, what does that mean, you know?
Yeah.
And but at the same time, like bubblegum doom, like I bet that totally makes sense because you can really play fast and loose with genre now and not have
Yeah.
to be one thing or another thing.
Indeed. Yeah, it's kind of tricky, you know, like I get sort of often frustrated with genres and sort of the need to use them. They can be kind of limiting, but they can also be useful as well. I mean, if you take something just like rock, you know, you can describe lots
Mhm.
of things as rock, but then the problem is if you call everything rock, then you don't necessarily know the distinction between something that's going to be Kings of Leon or Sonic Youth or,
Hmm.
you know, it could
Totally.
be like Elliott Smith. All of these things could potentially be rock, but or Nick Cave could be rock, and these things all
Hmm.
sound quite different from each other. So it's you kind of want more description, but then you don't necessarily, you know, want to get ridiculous with
Right.
the sub genres.
Yeah. It can be hard. And so I guess ultimately, like my hope is that people just listen to it and decide what they want to call it themselves. Some people call us dream
Mm.
doom,
It is kind of dreamy.
this dreaminess.
It is dreaminess. Something that I noticed that I was pleased to see, and this sort of ties into the conversation we were having right at the beginning, is that you have your own website.
Mhm.
Um, and I was going to ask you, I mean, I sort of have ideas now after talking with you, but was that something that you had decided that you wanted to do right from the get-go with Death Doula and not, you know, be dependent on having social media pages for the band?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking in the beginning about how I'm like a skeptic about social media, and in a perfect world, we are like able to be reaching people without having any social media at all. I miss the days of email newsletters because it's just like a
Mm,
mass thing that goes directly to people that are hopefully obsessed with you. And so yeah, we have a website. I think it's still there's going to be some changes that happen in the
mhm.
future, but I'm not really spearheading any of them, so I can't speak on that.
And it's deathdoulaband.com.
Hmm.
So I guess, and I mean, I know that you do have, so you've got the Instagram page,
Hmm.
and so in terms of people keeping up to date with releases and with shows, I mean, you've got the Bandcamp page as well.
Hmm.
I'm guessing that you'll like you post live shows that you've got coming up on Bandcamp. Do you also
Hmm.
put that onto your website?
Yeah. Wait, I actually don't know that the answer to that question. I think mostly Instagram and Bandcamp are where things come up. I think
Yeah.
they also come up on Spotify as well. So
On
Spotify
Spotify,
and
yes, that makes
yeah.
sense.
Mhm.
And so you mentioned that you're going to have a show in Seattle when
Mhm.
the album comes out on the 11th of October. Do you have any other live shows lined up in the coming weeks?
Just those two for now.
And what was the
Yeah.
other one apart from
The
the
other one
11th?
is the day before we're gonna play here in Portland. We're
Oh,
gonna
that
play
was the what was it called? The candy store.
the Lollipop Shop, the candy store. I'm gonna start calling it that.
I took the concept but got the name completely wrong.
Yeah, it's very close. That was really good.
Well,
I love
Kyle,
that.
on that note, it was great to talk to you. I'll let you get on to potentially your second cup of coffee of the day.
Definitely. All right. You too. Maybe no coffee for you though, because it's probably what, 7 o'clock there?
Exactly. I had a
All
coffee
right.
right at the beginning of the interview, so that was my last coffee of the day.
Yeah. Oh my God, that would keep me up all night.
All right, Kyle. Well, yeah, let me know when you do meet Neasy
I
Dynamite and tell
will.
that I said
It was
hi.
so great talking to you, man.
Pleasure. All the
Yeah,
best.
bye.
Ciao.
which one of us is the oracle? There is a fear of feeling, and a feeling of fear. Now that you're here, it's too precious. Do I deserve this, or am I the witness? You only watch your favorite movie with your favorite people.